2.
It's time for the Autobiography Benjamin Franklin live stream. Welcome into the Nutmeg Tavern, into the Townsends Book Club, as it were. And we are at about, episode 6, I think, here in the Autobiography. And my edition is all marked up. I hope yours is marked up as well. Maybe you've got your notes all posted in your Townsend's Book Club notebook. Ben Franklin, quite a character, and we finally here we've gotten him back into Pennsylvania, working away in the print shop. Let's see, where did we stop? We stopped at about somewhere in about 55, page 54. He's back working in Keimer's workshop, printing away, and the relationship has totally changed with that. He's no longer sort of like the lowly person. He's learned a lot in Keimer's workshop, and now he's gone to London, and he's like super printer, has gotten lots of experience and come back, and now he's head of the shop and teaching everyone else what to do. And it almost seems like Keimer's kind of he knows that Keimer in a sense is taking advantage of him, and as soon as everybody's all trained up, out he's going to go out the door because he won't need him anymore. Well, at least so Keimer thinks. He starts to introduce us to people working in the workshop, the other folks. And I think this is another interesting thing in the autobiography, is that he does all these sort of character studies for us. So he's watching other people and he's telling us about their personalities and how it sort of works out. And I think he's doing that obviously not because it's a good story, but because it's something that the people he's writing this book to need to be doing in their lives also. It's like, well, this might be a good friend. It might be a fun person, a witty person, but he's going to have foibles. It doesn't mean I'm necessarily not friends with him, but I know his weaknesses, and so he runs into this. And this first person that he talks about here is just exactly that. Let's see, I can't remember what this person's name is. No, I don't know what his name is right off the second here. But this person, he says, it was an odd thing to find an Oxford scholar in the situation of a bought servant. He was not more than 18 years of age. He gave me this account of himself, that he was born in Gloucester, educated at a grammar school there, had been distinguished among the scholars for some apparent superiority in performing his part when they exhibited plays belonging to the Witty Club there, and had written some pieces in prose and verse, which were printed in the Gloucester newspapers. Thence he was sent to Oxford, where he continued about a year. So this person is from Great Britain. Obviously sort of distinguished for having, being an intellect, or being, well-schooled, and he gets promotion by his ability to act, being an actor, and he goes to Oxford there for a while. But he's a bit of a dissolute person. He wished to, see things and to become a player, so he gets his quarterly allowance, possibly more likely from his parents, and instead of discharging his debts, he walks out of town, hides his robes that show him to be a student, and heads to London, and ends up in bad company and loses all his money, spends all his money. He says, walking the street, very hungry and not knowing what to do with himself, a Crimp's bill was put into his hand, offering immediate entertainment and encouragement to such as would bind themselves to serve in America. He went directly, signed the indentures, and was put into the ship, and came over, never writing a line to acquaint his friends what had become of him. He was lively, witty, good-natured, and a pleasant companion, but idle, thoughtless, and imprudent to the last degree. So it's like, yeah, nice guy, but whoa, reckless. So walking the streets hungry and seeing having a Crimp's bill put into his hand. And a Crimp is, oh, I forgot it. Wouldn't you know it? I had it all printed out. A Crimp is a factor or an agent that works for somebody. So a Crimp in London might be somebody who works at selling particular goods, but it also has a kind of a particular meaning of someone who procures people to work in the New World, or to work for ships, or maybe go to other kinds of colonies to do kind of servant work. And they're known to be tricky kind of people. Recruiters, everything's great, like he says here. Immediate entertainment. Oh, we'll feed you all the best. You'll have nothing. It'll be nothing but playtime. You'll work a couple hours and everything will be great. And in a couple of years, you'll be free to do whatever you want. Well, it's never like that. When you actually get there, you sign your indentures, you sign that contract, and it turns out, no, something totally different is going to happen to you. So that's the Crimp, and a Crimp's bill is like a little handout. Somebody's handing these things out, a little advertisement. If we go to, it's called the Unfortunate. There's a great book about a sort of a indentured servant story, and he was in kind of similar circumstances, bumming around London. He was from a nicer family, totally destitute of money, and ends up, when you're out, there's nothing else you can do. You sign your indentures and off to America you go. That's the circumstance with this person. Obviously, nice enough guy, but just didn't do the right thing here. He doesn't take long to explain John the Irishman. All he says is, John the Irishman soon ran away. Done. Gone. Indentured servant ran off. Keimer was not good at instructing these people. It's a good thing that he had somebody like Franklin there. Franklin really takes off and educates these men well. Our printing house often wanted sorts, and there was no letter founder in America. So there was nobody in America that was creating the type, the little letters to use to print things out with. I had seen types cast at James's in London, one of the print shops, but without much attention to the manner. However, I now contrived a mold and made use of the letters we had as puncheons, struck the matrices in lead, and thus supplied in pretty tolerable way all deficiencies. I also engraved several things on occasion. I made the ink, I was warehouseman, and everything, and in short, quite a factotum. So he was the man who could do any of the jobs, even including making ink and the typeset itself. And we'll read here later on in the next page or two, even going to the making the press itself and special kinds of presses. So it's obvious that, remember way back at the beginning, his father taking him around and seeing different trades, that he was somebody who was watching all these things happen, even though he said, I really wasn't paying attention to those people casting the letters. Well, obviously he was paying enough attention that he could figure out how to do it on his own. So he used the letters they already had to create impressions to cast new ones. They probably weren't nearly as nice because you're making a copy of a copy of a copy. But if you don't have to use too many of them, it doesn't show up too badly. Did you want to jump in, Ryan, with anything?
I don't have anything super pressing. There is a super chat from Hoodoo, Texas, says, I've really enjoyed your videos. appear to have been super chat blocked from a Russian YouTuber, so his loss is your gain.
Oh, well, sorry to hear that, but thank you so much. It's always good to hear from you folks out there.
We do hear some other people. Some folks have caught the PBS special that you were talking about.
Right.
So it looks like people are looking into Ben Franklin outside of this, which is really cool too.
Yes. There's a lot there. I mean, what we have here are just what he wants to say about himself up until the 1757, 1760, somewhere is where this stops. There's a lot of his life that isn't covered in this. And of course, you get a little bit different story from other people than you do from yourself. But nonetheless, he has a run-in with Keimer, and, he knew that it was coming sooner or later, and Keimer kind of makes an excuse to start to not treat him well. It's like, okay, how do I get rid of this guy so that I don't have to pay him? And everybody else seems to be trained up enough to get by. And I mean, he calls him out for something just ridiculous. He sticks his head out the window and Keimer sees him and was like, why aren't you working, or whatever? And Franklin at that point is just fed up. Keimer says, he's mad that the contract that he's signed with Ben Franklin, he has to give notice, like a month's notice before he fires him. And Franklin says, don't worry, I'll just leave now. He just picks up his hat and walks out. So, he obviously, maybe, was a little injudicious. I don't know. You think sometimes, Franklin here looks back in several of these instances where, maybe he's looking back in later life and thinking, okay, maybe I was a little precipitous, a little quick, a little hair trigger there. I should have just held off on that. It works out just fine for him. In fact, it works out better than fine for him. One of his friends there at the print shop brings his things to him because he didn't even bother to clean out his desk. It's like, you can just bring my things to me. The friend says, hey, I'm out of my indentures or my contract in the spring, in a couple of months, and my father will set us up together with a print shop. And so they go ahead and they order the press, and they order the types. And then Keimer comes back and says, oh, I got this possible really good job printing money in New Jersey. You want to come back and work for me? And basically knowing that if Keimer didn't do that, Bradford, the other printer, would pick him up, and Bradford would get the really good deal printing the money. He goes and he kind of tells us about this job. Yeah, here's the part where Keimer, on the prospect of being employed to print some money, paper money in New Jersey, which would require cuts in various types that I only could supply, and apprehending Bradford might engage me and get the job from him, sent me a very civil message that old friends should not part for a few words, the effect of sudden passion and wishing me to return. It's like, oh, it was, I shouldn't have said those things, So Franklin goes, they go to New Jersey to do this print job. And is it just, when you're printing money, it isn't just a regular print job. People they watch you they want to make sure you only print, the right number of bills. It's like, I'm printing money for you, you're looking, I'm printing 100,000, you're not looking, I'm printing another 100,000 for me, right? So whenever you're printing money, you're kind of either doing it under supervision, or in this case, they actually go to New Jersey, set up a whole satellite print shop, and are watched while they do this special kind of printing. Now, he says that he contrived a copper plate press for it, the first that had been seen in this country. So regular printing, the type sticks up, and you rub ink on the type, and then you put the paper on it, and you press it down, and it's that ink that sits on the top of those letters that gets pressed in to the paper. Copper plate is exactly the opposite. So you have this big big piece of copper, big sheet, smooth sheet of copper. You engrave in it or you etch it, you create lines in it. Then you rub ink all over it. The ink falls down into the grooves. You wipe it all off, and then you press the paper on it, and the paper goes down into the grooves and picks up the ink, and then it's done. So it's totally the opposite. And you don't need letters. And money is something that doesn't need to have nearly as much writing on it, but it needs to have all these hard to do lines. So the same way, you don't want people to counterfeit your money today, and so we have special kinds of printing so that we can tell it doesn't look like it came out of a photocopier, right? Same thing going on here. And in fact, this the copperplate press is intaglio, that being that you smash the paper down into those grooves, and that's paper money's still done that way today.
Do you know anything else about regulations for printing money?
Well, that it very varied. So each kind of state had their own, and he's going to talk about paper money here, probably in some future episode. I don't think we get to it today, but each state has its own idea about what it can do and what it can't do with paper money. Paper money is also regulated by the mother country. So in Great Britain, in this case, in the early 18th century, Great Britain is telling these states, sometimes they kind of go on their own and they start printing money and they have to be reined back in. It's like, no, you can't just do that. So there were times when Great Britain stepped in and told them, no, you can't print this money. But most of this, in these kind of cases, the colonies are just deciding to do it on their own for various different reasons. And we do, if you're interested, have a whole money episode that covers that, kind of a lengthy money episode. You can go back and check that out. So he goes to New Jersey with Keimer. They set up their special copperplate press. He either has other people, well, I think he says here, I cut several ornaments and checks for the bill. Look, somebody's going to bring me something. What are you going to bring me? Oh, you brought me thank you very much. Look at that. So somebody was paying attention here. Yeah, here's the definition of a crimp from the Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue. We should print that. You know that? Yes. Crimp, a broker or a factor, as a coal crimp who disposes of cargoes of Newcastle coal ships. Also, persons employed to trepan or kidnap recruits for the East India Company and African companies. To crimp or to play crimp is to play foul or booty. So there you go. That's what a crimp is, and generally not a savory character, generally. Although, at least if you're selling coal, you're not kidnapping people. Money episode, you can go check that out.
Money episode link is dropped in the chat.
There we go, thank you. New Jersey, while he's in New Jersey, seems like all these kind of circumstances, he goes into a new area like this, and because they're printing money, and that's kind of important, and is generally directly connected with the government, and the government sends particular men to come in to watch the money being printed, because number one, they think it's fun, and number two, they want to make sure they don't print too many things. They're of course important men. They don't just send anybody, and these important men bring along with them friends, and so there's all these connections that Ben Franklin is making with more and more important people in New Jersey. And New Jersey is right there beside Pennsylvania, right? Really just separated by that river. In fact, New Jersey, West Jersey was part of the Quaker settlements. So there was some real direct connections between New Jersey and Pennsylvania at the time, instead of it being like very, very different culture, which some colonies were. But he makes these acquaintances and direct connections with, very important people while he is there. And in fact, they seem to, kind of, they pay a lot of attention to Ben Franklin and virtually no attention to Keimer, his, as it were, boss. Everybody sort of ignores him and goes directly to Ben Franklin and talks to him. And for multiple reasons here. Maybe he's just trying to be a little mean to Keimer, but he says he was slovenly to extreme dirtiness, enthusiastic in some points of religion, which can drive people away, and a little knavish withal. So he was a jerk. Okay, we'll just say it right there. He's a jerk. He then skips onto this section here for like a page or so, and he starts to deal. He says, before I enter upon my public appearances in business, it may be well to know that you know then the state of my mind with regard to my principles and morals. And so he spends about a page talking about morals, and he was brought up in a very strict religious household, but he was a free thinker. He was a free thinker from before he even came to Pennsylvania. He talks about some books against deism that he was reading, and he, of course, is convinced otherwise when he's reading the books. It's like, well, their arguments are so poor that I think I'm, for the opposite of whatever this book is about. But like so many of these things, it takes him a little while, and he kind of works through the deism more. He says, I began to suspect that this doctrine, deism, though it might be true, was not very useful. So it's like, maybe if everyone thought exactly like I did, that's not the kind of world I would want to live in. So here he says, I concluded that nothing could possibly be wrong in the world, or at least maybe it's like, let's see, my London, maybe it is. My London pamphlet concluded that, and I'm skipping ahead, concluded that nothing could possibly be wrong in the world, and that vice and virtue were empty distinctions. No such things existing. It appeared now not so clever a performance as I once thought it, and I doubt whether some error had not insinuated itself unperceived into my argument, so as to infect all that followed, as is common in metaphysical reasoning. Quite true. If you have some foundational concept that you base all your things upon, and that isn't quite right, it sometimes just takes a little bit of wrong thinking in that foundational. Maybe it's not all wrong, but just a little. Boy, you get way off by the time it gets extrapolated into application in real life. And that's where he's like, yeah, if that's, if this deism is exactly what they say it is, and that's the way the world actually works, somehow it doesn't work out in the end. So he decides, being the free thinker that he is, that he's going to reject some of that and basically come up with his own set of moral thinking. This is still pretty deistic. And like any of these, religious concepts in the time period, there's a great scale of thinking here. You can take any of these religious thoughts and take them to wild extremes, and obviously he's like, well, that one extreme way over there just doesn't seem to make any sense. So he comes up with he says, I formed written resolutions which still remain in my journal book, and in other places he talked about sort of his set of rules for living. Good rules, right? I'm not going to say they aren't. I don't know about where he got the conclusions from. It's like, okay, why do I need these set of rules? He does go through this, he comes up with this sort of thought process of maybe things aren't bad because they're forbidden, but they're bad because they're not good for us, and the things we're supposed to do aren't just good because they're written and they say we have to do them, but because they're good things to do. So, and then he writes, and this persuasion with the kind hand of providences, or some guardian angel, or accidental favorable circumstances and situations, or altogether preserved me through this dangerous time of youth and the hazardous situations I was sometimes in amongst strangers, remote from the eye and advice of my father. So he was in a lot of situations where, there was nobody to protect him, and he still came out all right. Right, and so he's still not willing to say whether that was accidental or something else.
Folks are wondering how old he is at this time.
We are still somewhere in his early 20s, I think. I'm not sure exactly what year we are at, but yeah, let's say his early 20s, probably very early 20s, 21, 22, something like that. Okay.
I'm sorry. Robert Green sent in a super chat. Said, "Hi John, what did you think of the documentary I sent you about the Endeavour ship?"
Oh, I think I saw it, but I haven't had a chance to dig into it yet. So it's on my very long list of, John, you're supposed to be watching this, like the PBS Benjamin Franklin series, which I haven't yet been able to dig into because I'm busy working on this, guys. How can I?
There's a lot to do.
Yeah,
you know that?
There's a lot to do. And already today we shot a video, and that's like, now we do a live stream. Anyway. Are you done there?
I'm done.
Right? Okay,
Let's go.
Good.
Don't wait on me.
Oh, no problem. Finally, it turns out that it's time for him to leave Keimer's shop for good and all. He leaves it on a good kind of footing here, although they didn't tell Keimer, oh yeah, my press and my letters have finally shown up, so I'm ready to set up shop as competition. He rents a house and to set up shop in. He even finds somebody to board with them, so that he doesn't have to foot the bill completely on his own. And he starts his little print shop. He even talks about someone coming in and giving him his first print job, a small print job, but that first, like that first dollar that people frame. Well, he talks about that concept here. It's like, boy, that first 5 shillings, that first crown piece, which is basically a silver dollar. How does he say it? He says, all our cash was now expended in a variety of particulars. We had been obliged to procure, and this countryman's 5 shillings, being our first fruits and coming so seasonably, gave me more pleasure than any crown I have since earned. And the gratitude I felt toward House, the particular person here that brought him the job, has made me often more ready than perhaps I should otherwise to assist young beginners. So this is one of the people he was helping out. So there's this paragraph here, and like I was saying, he gives us these character studies, and now he's going to give us this character study of Samuel Mickle. And Mickle is a word that is used in like 18th century Scottish, and usually it means great or big, like Mickle horse is a big horse. Don't ask me why his name is great, but there you go. He says, there are croakers in every country, always boding its ruin. Such a one then lived in Pennsylvania, a person of note, an elderly man with a wise look and a very grave manner of speaking, and his name was Samuel Mickle. This gentleman, a stranger to me, stopped one day at my door and asked me if I was the young man who lately opened a new printing house. Being answered in the affirmative, he said he was sorry for me because it was an expensive undertaking and the expense would be lost. For Philadelphia was a sinking place, the people already half bankrupts or near being so, all appearances to the contrary, such as new buildings and the rise of rents being in his certain knowledge fallacious, for they were in fact among the things that would ruin us. And he gave me such a detail of misfortunes now existing, or that were soon to exist, that he left me half melancholy. Had I known him before I engaged in this business, I probably never should have done it. Of course, none of these things were true. I think we all maybe know a person that's like a Samuel Mickle in our lives. Oh, you don't want to do that. Oh, you don't want to, the kind of, it's like if you listen to them, nothing. You'd never do anything. So that was Samuel Mickle. Of course, he goes on to explain Samuel Mickle was saying, oh, everything's going to collapse tomorrow. And so he was always waiting to buy a house, and he waited so long that he paid 5 times more for it because, he was always waiting for something to collapse. He goes on to describe the junta, or junto, here. And it's a group, a club, a mastermind of all these sort of thinking gentlemen that get together and debate each other about things. And boy, this, it sounds like it would be kind of fun and very intellectually rigorous. So he says, it met on Friday evenings. The rules that I drew up required that every member in his turn should produce 1 or more queries on any point of morals, politics, or natural philosophy to be discussed by the company, and once in 3 months produce and read an essay of his own writing on any subject he pleased. Our debates were to be under the direction of a president and to be conducted in the sincere spirit of inquiry after truth, not fondness for dispute or desire of victory, and to prevent warmth all expressions of positiveness in opinions or direct contradiction were after some time made contraband and prohibited under small pecuniary penalties. Very interesting that and notice, these rules about the engagement and being too contrary wasn't a rule that showed up right away. And he starts talking about people that are in this club with him. And then he notes one here. Let me see if I can find him. I don't think I picked him out specifically. No, I can't find him. Anyway, there was one particular person who was a very contrary kind of person. And he says something like, he didn't last very long with us. They booted him out, probably booted him out and then made the new rule. It's like, this is not helpful to, our society where we're trying to, make progress. Maybe he was a little too much like Samuel Mickle. Very, very troublesome member of the club. I'll have to find him. He was, he didn't sound very fun to be with. But many of these other people, some of them were sort of, kind of way up in the society, surveyor general, somebody who was a very good joiner. And then other people were a little more lowly, but just on their own did lots and lots of reading. And really, that's what education, true sort of college education is in this time period, and why people want to talk to him. And it's like, oh, this person has a big library. Or immediately people want to talk to him because that's where learning is. It isn't necessarily with, great teachers in this time period, but it's how many books have you read? He has this, they start to do their little print shop, and obviously it's in its infancy, and he has this partner that works with him. He gets a printing job, printing 40 sheets of the history of Quakers. So the Quaker Church, they decide they need, history. They want this bound in a book, and in these book settings, if it's a rather large book, that's a very, very big print job. And so they had kind of spread out the printing job with different printers. And so he got this contract for 40 of the pages of this, who knows how big the book was. Don't ask me how they kept that all in line.
Sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, it does. It's like, okay, well, we're missing page 2. I can't print, we can't bound any of these books because we're missing one particular page. But they work really, really hard at this. And he has this kind of, I'm going to do a page a day. Even when other print jobs come in, he kind of, keeps at it and makes it very, kind of one of those, it doesn't matter how much work comes in, I'm still going to get that page done. Other people see him working that hard, and it's just him and the other guy. He has to do all the composing. The other person just works the press, and he's composing, and he's doing some of the press work, and, all these other things. There was even one day when he got it all set up, and you can imagine this big box, the box the size of the page, and you've set all these letters in just right. You probably spent 4 hours getting everything laid out and all perfectly set. And he's carrying it, and it drops and everything goes all over the floor. All the work is lost. So he redoes the entire page again because it's like, no, I'm going to get this page done, even though it was midnight, whatever. And his neighbors and the people around him are watching what's going on. I was told that mention being made of the new printing office at the Merchants Every Night Club, the general opinion was that it must fail. There being already 2 printers in that place, Keimer and Bradford. But Dr. Baird, whom you and I saw many years after at his native place in Scotland, he said, as a contrary opinion, for the industry of that Franklin, says he, is superior to anything I ever saw of the kind. I see him still at work when I go home from the club, and he's still at work, and he's work again before his neighbors are out of bed. This makes everybody think. It's like, they're working really hard. These other printers are known for being kind of lazy. Keimer's, known for making other people do the work, and he's, reading books, or he's, talking to somebody about something he shouldn't be talking about. And there's Benjamin Franklin, hard at work, making sure that page gets done, and it doesn't matter what time of night it is. And then he says, I mention this industry the more particularly and the more freely, though it seems to be talking in my own praise, that those of my posterity who shall read it may know the use of that virtue when they see the effects in my favor throughout this relation. So all through the book, he's saying, yeah, my being extremely, working hard at this, it made a lot of difference to how people saw me and how they were willing to engage with me. He has a situation. He wants to start a newspaper, and he's not ready to do it yet. He has a friend who, he injudiciously, and sometimes we do that in life. We tell people about one of our projects. It's like, hey, I can't hire you now, but I think I'm going to start a newspaper in 3 months, and probably then I can take you on, right? And this person, he blabs. He shouldn't have done that. He should have, gotten some, cross your heart promise from this guy, but he didn't. And Keimer finds out about Franklin working on a newspaper, and so he says, I'm going to start a newspaper. So Bradford already has his newspaper he's had for a long time. Keimer decides he's going to come out, and Franklin's like, okay, what am I going to do? And so Franklin starts to write a series of articles for Bradford's newspaper to kind of deflate the new newspaper that's coming in. So, I mean, it's like, oh, okay, I can do this. So it must have been really interesting for Bradford, who's printing the newspapers, like, okay, yeah, I'll get articles, great articles from Ben Franklin, I'll print those. And anyway, the cutthroat printing business in Philadelphia. He talks about how important it was to having learnt a little to scribble. So it was an important part of his, printing career that he has something to print and that he's the person who can write those things. He doesn't have to rely on other people to give him content. He does end up, Keimer does start his newspaper up. I'm not sure if I'm skipping ahead too far. Maybe I am. I was going to end here pretty soon. But Keimer ends up kind of failing with his newspaper after a while, 3/4 of a year, and sells it to Ben Franklin. Yeah, that worked out. And then Ben Franklin takes it in hand and really takes it into something, and does kind of makes it nicer than any other newspaper. Just looking, sometimes that's all it takes. It just looks more professional. So he does really well with that, and he starts to get government print jobs too. So when he starts to get, when the Congress, as it were, for Pennsylvania, or the Assembly, the Massachusetts Assembly, other kind of government print jobs come up, and he starts to get that business that was going to Bradford and Keimer. He ends up with some of those, and those are some of those well-paying jobs. And I think that's where we're going to stop, right in the middle of page 65 in this edition of the Autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. A lot to take in there, and we really start to see the inner workings of the printing industry, and we can extrapolate that into other industries there. It's a pretty small world. Philadelphia, we think of it as a really big city, and it was a big city for the colonies in the time period. And really, there was just, 3 guys competing there at the end, and really only 2 at any one particular time. I mean, while there's 3 for just a little bit, it doesn't take long for Keimer, once he has 2 competitors, to he just loses. He fails.
Alena Park is wondering from where did he get the money to buy the newspaper?
Well, he does talk about he still owes that one bit of money to somebody. So the print shop at the beginning is partnered with one of the apprentice's family. So the apprentice's father is going to loan him like £100 and maybe 100 more to, it kind of has to sustain itself for a little while. You got to pay for the press and those sorts of things. And their printing is, they're doing better and better. And he is able at one point to sort of buy off his partner. His partner just is not good. He really wants to be a farmer. He drinks too much, and it ends up that, and the father wasn't able to really come through with that second amount of money that they really needed. Ben Franklin by that time has gotten a couple of friends that are willing to support him in that beginning thing. So he gets another 100, 200 pounds, whatever, to basically buy off that partner, and in this case, he's getting wealthy enough to buy the newspaper from Keimer. And I think by the time it was time for Keimer to sell it, it didn't cost that much.
Okay, so this is got like 3 questions in it. John Talley asks, is there something that you could point to that influenced Franklin to become the innovator and thinker that he was? What makes that kind of person? Was it uncommon to move up in class the way that he did?
Well, I think we touched on it partially there at the beginning. He was, first, I think people have estimated, I don't know what the current estimation of his IQ is. The last time I looked at it was like 160. He was a super smart guy. And early on, he was introduced to a lot of reading. And he is a voracious reader. And that's where he's accumulating this, innovative thought processes, because it's all that, put this idea with that idea and that idea, you smear them together, and what do you get, right? And that's where new ideas come from. They don't just spring, generally just don't spring out of our heads out of nothing, but they spring out of, 3 or 4 different things happening to us, things we read about, you put them together, and it's like a recipe, you get something totally different. So he's really good at that, and he's good at watching what's going on, even when he was a kid, watching those industries, and later on, he's watching those print shops, he's watching what's working and what's not working. He's just being super thoughtful, and I think probably more so than anything else about what's happening inside of him. I think a lot of people go through life without any introspection.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Right? And he's very introspective, at least at this point when he's writing the book, saying, yeah, that was right, that was wrong, I was learning here. So there's I think that is a key component there. And then the idea of moving up in the world. So yeah, his father's a tallow chandler, and he is still a very, a learning person and encouraging learning in his children. He just doesn't take that with any ambition. His father probably could have worked himself upward. We don't think too much about the kind of locked-in class system as much in America today. There's some of that, certainly, but we know of people, that have moved up, famous people, right? That certainly, not nearly as much of that is happening in Great Britain at the time period, but the colonies are the Wild West, where crazy things can happen and people can start out and move up. It still isn't easy, but there isn't the same kind of super upper royalty class to always fit down underneath. So in the colonies, that upper region, even though it might be almost just as impossible to get to, doesn't seem quite as hierarchical or let's say all just about family, right? Obviously to a great extent it still is, but we just don't have those shining examples like the king, right?
I think that there's something to be said about his people skills and his desire to connect with people. I know a lot of very intelligent people that are kind of held back because they want to be kind of by themselves and be intelligent, right?
Yeah. I think they're missing a lot of those social skills, and maybe he kind of implies in here that he has to work through that in himself, like his father saying, being a disputer and a scoffer, or someone who's always being like being contrary all the time, or saying the real answer to this, isn't the best way to interact in society. So maybe at some point you've got enough smarts that you can't show them, right? You have to act like a real person in society. I don't know. It's a tough
interesting. Somebody else was asking if writing autobiographies was something that was popular in that time period. Was he seeing other people doing that?
There's some of that. I think memoirs get to be a lot more popular when you get into the 19th century. And luckily we have those like The Bark-Covered House and some of those other ones, which are memoirs, sort of autobiographies that help us understand what's going on.
Somebody in the chat missed what happened with the apprenticeship with his brother.
Yeah, so the apprenticeship with his brother got in trouble for things he wrote in the newspaper, and the government, or in the whatever the ruling body was there, decided to put him in jail. And then when they let him out of jail, they said, you can no longer print XYZ, no longer can, whatever his name was, I can't remember his name, no longer can, James Franklin print the current newspaper. And so to get around that, he had his younger brother, still an indentured servant, print it under his name. But you can't do that as an indentured servant, so they made the paperwork to say they canceled the indenture so he could be a real regular person, but in reality there was a secret indenture underneath it that nobody knew about. It was just it's like, how do we get around this ruling? Well, Benjamin Franklin used that against his brother, said, this secret indenture isn't going to hold, so I'm leaving. And the brother really didn't have any choice. He didn't make any friends with his brother doing that.
You probably don't have a hard answer, but do you have an estimated population of Philadelphia in this time period?
I don't. No. I don't. Off the top of my head, I believe it's somewhere around 10 or 20,000.
Okay.
I could be wrong by a whole factor of 5 there, but I'm pretty sure it's down in that area.
Okay, and then there are some other questions, but we're going to get to those, like when did he get married and that sort of thing. Yes. We've got a lot of reading to do still.
That's probably in the next, I know it's either in the next episode or the one after that where we get to the marriage thing. And, weird. That whole thing is a little strange.
And I think that you wanted to talk about calendars today, right?
Yeah. I just thought I'd mention this really quick. Not usually, but sometimes we do a calendar, a cooking calendar. We do, finally, yes, what month is it? We do have a calendar for this year, Ian. Blame the printers and the paper. Let me tell you, paper is really, why would you think there would be a paper shortage? But calendars, if you're interested in a calendar, you'll be able to find it on the website. These aren't just getting mailed out and en masse to every customer, but you got to actually ask for them to be put into your order or order it specifically.
I just dropped the link in the chat.
Oh, good. The link is up.
Yeah, I was surprised.
Yeah, it's like, ooh, yes. So if you're interested in the calendar, you can check that out. And it's full of lots of pretty pictures and recipes and all that good stuff. Ryan did a great job.
Thank you.
Well, everybody, I hope you've enjoyed this Benjamin Franklin autobiography live stream. It is amazing going through this book over and over again because I just have to, it's like, okay, read that section again and find a new thing. And it's so full, so chock full of good stuff. And I know I'm probably missing 90% of it. You guys are probably getting even more on your own, so I'm super glad that you all are along with us on this. Yes, I will have to dig into the comment section, and hopefully at the beginning of the next episode, we'll kind of do a quick, lightning round of some quick answers, quick questions and answers that I can get to, and then dip into the next section. And again, we're going to go 10, 12 pages. I think we ended at about 65, and we'll move into 75. So thanks, Ryan. Thank you guys for joining us today. Hope you have a beautiful afternoon. The sun finally came out here. It looks great outside. Still just as wet as something really, really wet. We'll see you folks later. Thanks for watching.